Continue to get analysis on one of the biggest stories of the day. It's a letter to the African National Congress. Its president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says the party should publicly disassociate itself from anyone accused of corruption. Ramaphosa says he intends, as leader of the ANC and as president, to end all forms of corruption. Party members and government officials that have been accused of corruption related to COVID-19, they should disassociate themselves from them. Can this actually work? For analysis and reaction, I'm joined by political analyst Khaya Sithole via Skype this afternoon. Hello to you, Khaya. A lot of criticism of the president's letter, saying it all looks good on paper, it's not practically going to work. What was your first reaction?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the viewers. I think obviously the letter itself is quite a very interesting and an unusual and perhaps even an unexpected step taken by the president, in that he's really trying to call for some sense of introspection from his party members, because we all know that at the heart of the corruption allegations at the state and at the political level, his party is undoubtedly at the epicenter of it. And I think what was interesting about it is that it seems to be taking the view that actually the members that is writing to have the capacity and the ability to do that type of introspection that then gets them to engage differently. The problem with the letter of this nature is that it sort of seems to be based on the premise that the members themselves, or the people that get implicated in these things, are unaware of how deeply problematic it is for the nation at large, how deeply problematic it is for the people that expect services to be delivered to then see the corruption stealing the money away. Those people are fully aware of that particular consequence. So this letter is not a groundbreaking revelation that is suddenly going to get them to act differently tomorrow. So it's an important political step, and it's an important for public perception. But I don't think that any of the people that are planning on stealing a rand or two tomorrow are now going to suddenly say, oops, there's been a letter released, let me think differently. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, even though there's a letter from the principal about this. Khaya, this is where I get stuck. Help me understand. I want to read two things for you, give our viewers context. This is from the letter itself. I apparently need glasses to read now. The ANC should publicly disassociate itself from anyone, whether business, donor, supporter or member, accused of corruption or reported to be involved in corruption. This goes in complete contradiction of the theory of innocent until proven guilty. How do you try and marry these two concepts?
Well, it's very simple. The theory of innocent until proven guilty is not a political theory. It's a judicial theory. That is what one must apply when people are then dragged before the courts, and that the assumption must be that they're innocent until proven guilty. The basis of evaluation in politics is a bit different, in that if there is a particular allegation, and that particular allegation has got the effect or the consequence of getting a disaffected voter or somebody who's trying to decide on a political home to then say, I will not vote for the party, then it has an implication even if the person has not been convicted by a court. So I think in the ANC's understanding of what the issue is here, they should not seek to then apply the judicial barometer or the judicial benchmark, because when voters are trying to make a decision, they're not going to really apply the same type of logic. So here, we've heard previously that the ANC always insists that until a person is proven guilty, then there's nothing wrong with them. But unfortunately, the way the system works is that there's such a long delay in getting people to actually then be tried and be convicted or acquitted. It leaves this cloud hanging over them. And of course, it then also provides political mileage to opposition parties to say, well, look at the people that the ANC is putting forward as public representatives. So of course, that already dents its electoral prospects in one way or another. So I do think that it's quite interesting that it's now taking the view that even people who are simply accused should then be treated with the same sort of hostility, to say, until you clear the cloud hanging over you, we don't want you to be the face of the party. Now, of course, this letter is written in exactly the same month, or even the same week, that Zandile Gumede, who's facing serious corruption allegations, was then elevated to a position of a public representative in KwaZulu-Natal. So sometimes you look at what Ramaphosa says, and then you look at what actually happens within his party, and you have to wonder whether he actually has an understanding of the fact that people can actually see what is happening out there. So the letter would have left a lot of people wondering, well, shouldn't you have started with the most explicit and the most brazen illustration of the ANC's inability to understand what the public expects of it, and then deal with that matter, and then say, on the basis of having dealt with that matter, this is the line of march. So the letter in the same week that Zandile Gumede was elevated, it's a whole lot of nonsense, isn't it?
It is, and I was about to ask you that exact example of Zandile Gumede. It's almost as though you read my mind on that, so I'm glad you beat me to that one. Khaya, the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, says that this is a line in the sand drawn by Cyril Ramaphosa, but the line in that actual sand keeps shifting.
Yeah, it is probably quite accurate for the interim leader of the DA to say, actually, Ramaphosa may say these particular things, but until we actually see it happening, until we see the ANC taking the position, whether on principle or, as they say, as a result of their own resolutions, to simply say, we believe that the benchmark or the barometer for people being in and out of public office should either be this or that, it becomes difficult to know what exactly means. So, for example, if somebody close to him or close to his faction gets accused of corruption tomorrow, will he actually maintain the same stance of saying, I want you out of office until this matter is cleared because it's denting the image of the ANC? The problem, of course, is that he doesn't operate in a vacuum. He also operates with some political backing or some political factions that keep him in power. And of course, the litmus test will be what happens when somebody close to him, when somebody on his own side of the political divide has to then be called to account. Will he apply the same logic? And we can only wait and see what happens if that does materialize. But the ANC being what it is, it's only a matter of time before somebody close to the president gets implicated.
Is it enough for the president to say we dip our heads in shame? Often criticism put level towards politicians is that they are unwilling to accept the problems that they've created and the problems they're experiencing. Is he getting any political points for saying we dip our heads in shame just by acknowledging there's a problem?
I think we're at the stage in time where people actually want to see consequences for people having stolen public funds. To simply say, I'm ashamed, or to simply say, I'm sorry, is just not going to cut it. And I think what you see here is that in relation to this particular pandemic and this particular crisis, we must make peace with the fact that when money gets stolen and gets redirected, the most clear consequence may be a loss of life when somebody who would have received some form of treatment does not receive that form of treatment because the money has been redirected also. So I don't think it will be good enough to say, here are a couple of people who've lost their lives because corruption stole the resources that were supposed to save their lives, only for the ANC to say, oops, we are ashamed about that, please forgive us. We need to see actual consequence management, and South Africans are now only going to be satisfied if somebody actually gets held to account and we either recover the money or they go to jail.
And who, as a final question to you, Khaya Sithole, who should the president start with?
The president at this stage is actually an executive leader, so he's not a judicial leader. So unfortunately, you want the judicial processes to be honored. You want them to be a bit faster than what we've seen them before, because we don't want the type of interference that quite simply led us to this crisis in the first place. So we do need to be a bit more demanding of the law enforcement agencies to say, never mind how lethargic your systems have been before, we've got a particular crisis that we need to be able to solve with a much greater sense of urgency. And I think what we've seen in the past couple of weeks, even the fusion of different agencies to try and then accelerate some of these processes, is a step in the right direction. But as we speak today, there aren't enough people in prison for us to say the system is working. So we've seen enough of the hysteria. We need to see the action now.
All right, Khaya Sithole, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this afternoon. Have a great Sunday. Political analyst Khaya Sithole joining us here on eNCA, talking about that letter from ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa.